I'm Scott Keegan, and this is my wife, Claire.
We're the Zweerinks. I'm Phil.
I'm Renee.
And Bob asked us to talk just a little bit about some of our giving experience.
So growing up, I always got the perception, not that we were poor, but just that there wasn't a ton of extra money in the family budget. So that was something I was just kind of always conscious of growing up.
Money was kind of talked about in our family, but money was tight. It was the 80s, my dad's business was having a hard time.
I kind of realized maybe that we didn't have a ton of money. And then further into like middle school, high school, I knew that we were kind of just trying to make ends meet, but money wasn't like really talked about hugely in our family.
My parents worked really hard to make it so that we had all that we needed, but they definitely had to say no to some things. But
I was always taught to be really responsible with money, and that was kind of something drilled into me at a young age. And then as far as giving goes, my parents, they always tithed growing up, and whenever we got money for our birthday or anything like that, they always had us tithe part of that. And so that was just something that they always made sure to do. That was always like the first dollars that they planned for in the budget. And so that's just kind of what I experienced growing up with giving.
I think over the course of our marriage and as we've gotten older, I think we started thinking about giving in a different way and how to move beyond just from obedience, but really more how to do it with our whole heart and how to do it how to be challenged to do it sacrificially.
Whenever we first talked about tithing together, it was a pretty short discussion just because both of us had kind of grown up tithing. So it was kind of like, are we gonna do this? Are we gonna do this? Yep, okay, cool. I came into marriage probably wanting to save everything, and Claire came in not wanting to spend everything, but she was more liberal spending. And so we both kind of balanced each other out and both kind of taught each other.
There's always this place in there where we're tempted to kind of go, hey, we could really use that money in a different way. We could really use it for whether it's a car payment or a house payment or clothes or whatever.
I do think that God challenged us to think about how do we give beyond the 10% and how do we give sacrificially even when it's kind of scary.
I think in the early days, like early on, it really wasn't that hard to tithe because on a percentage basis, we were doing the same percentage, but we were making a lot less, so it didn't feel like we were giving a ton really. But also adding kids into the picture makes the budget a little bit tighter, and so now that same percentage is still like, okay, that's a little bit bigger pill to swallow. It's still been good, but it's just been a little bit harder, I guess.
I work for a ministry that requires people to give money for me to have a salary, and there have been a few times in our history where there just hasn't been enough money. And so we have gone on reduced salary, and especially during those times, it's a complicated thing to like, do we reduce what we're giving based on our annual salary or whatever? And it has been a challenge for us to go, hey, during those times we're not. There are other people depending upon what we're giving to them. So we're going to go ahead and give in that way, give in a sacrificial way. And I just think that there are some spaces for us where we have just went, okay, God, you've provided for us in the past. We had some years early on where we had a phone bill once and just didn't have quite enough money to pay for it, and all of a sudden $20 showed up in a parking lot of a grocery store to take care of that need. So understanding that God really does provide is a big deal.
I think just like remembering that the money is not ours. Like, it's from God and we are blessed by it, and we are just called to steward it well. So I think having that mind shift has been really helpful. And then just generosity doesn't have to be tied to money. I think I've really felt convicted of that over the past couple of years. It's opening our home or taking a meal to someone. So there are so many other ways that we're called to be generous too.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I think if we wouldn't have taken those opportunities to give, we would have just missed out on God just showing us how amazing He is at keeping His promises and how faithful He is. And also, I think when God gives us those opportunities to come alongside the church or other ministries or other people doing mission work in other places in the world, like we get invited to like partner with them. And I think when we say yes to those things, we get like a really awesome front row seat to like what they're doing. And we get to see God do all of His amazing, glorious things through those people too. So I think that's been really cool to see that.
Giving has just been a really good lesson for me of just my ultimate security doesn't come from money or how much is in savings. It comes from God and knowing that He's going to provide no matter what we do or don't have in the bank.
You know, if you do have children, young children, teenagers, whatever, I think it is to have those conversations with your kids. We're not perfect at it, but I think we did benefit from our parents talking some about money, and especially as we got into our teenage years and our college years, they did a lot more freely talk about what they did with their money and what it looked like to give it away. So I think, modeling it to our younger generations is really key.
I think the biggest advice around giving generously is just starting somewhere. So I know for myself, like there's been times where I'm like, okay, well I know I'm called to give 10% or whatever it is. And there's been months where I'm just like, oh, I don't feel like I can do that. And so I just get discouraged and don't give anything. And like 2% is better than nothing, you know? And so it's really not about the amount that you're giving. It's about doing it with a humble and generous heart and just trying to love others well.
And I would also say, like, Renee and I had the privilege of like having that modeled for us and seeing it from a young age. But we're not standing here with any sort of perfection in that realm or whatever. And I just want to communicate that I think there's never a bad time to really lean into that conversation with Jesus. And what He's calling you to do. Don't get hung up on the percentages, but like genuinely listen and go, what should I do now? Not worrying about the past, not worrying about the future, but just kind of going, hey, what is God telling me right now? And leaning into that conversation and going, how can I, in this moment, go, all right, God, I'm going to trust You. I'm going to be obedient, and I'm going to give and just watch you do what You do.
God has always taken care of us. It doesn't always look the way that we think it's going to look, but man, He has surprised us in some ways, and how He has always taken care of us, and that's just a really good reminder of His faithfulness and how He's such a good provider.